In the spirit of stuff like, say, Jam Slam and my efforts, personally, to bridge into game coaching, which is ironic because I'm, like, this bitter contrarian who doesn't really even have fun playing most games, including this one, but I wanted to revise my ye olden Autistic guide to Street Fighter, my ever-so-classic video series for Street Fighter V that Brian F. lauded on Twitter that one time because he didn't realize that I called it the Autistic Guide because I am autistic and it was my guide. What makes the Autistic Guide different from the generic Neurotypicals guide is I suck and I hate everything and I understand weird fucking people and I understand normal people and why they are the way they are. I've coached people from all sorts of skill levels, backgrounds, psychological dispositions, and in real life, I've been an educator or a tutor for a variety of age groups and subjects. I feel like a lot of guides tell you what to do, but don't really capture the why and how of it all, or really tap into the mindset of the new player. They don't scratch the surface of the psychosexual experience, the spiritual journey, or the weed brownies, or any of that important shit. Also, I've seen a lot of, like, pro-level players trying to coach beginner players, and personally I think most of them do a fucking shit job of it. They have no teaching experience, they're not great communicators, they can't put themselves in the shoes of someone who doesn't understand a fucking word they're saying, and their hands know nothing about how to move or do basic actions, nor do they even know what basic stuff looks like or how to visually identify what you're talking about. They just, they'll straight up just bark random shit at the players, like, oh, he's in burnout, do this move that you know the name of totally, or something, with no explanation for why, or how, or no self-discovery or anything. It's nuts. This is why Japan is 20 years ahead of us in terms of coaching in the overall ecosystem. Just actual fucking backseat gamers, but with more pedigree. Doing a thing is not the same skill set as being able to teach a thing, nor is learning ever an entirely straightforward process. As far as I'm aware, Automatic is the best US coach by far, and has good content. Diaphone is not a bad coach. Zaffarino has a lot of really excellent coaching advice content on YouTube, and Nemo has a fair share of great advice content as well. In my old Autistic guide, I started by talking about the 4 types of video game players that game developers have been using as a psychological profile of players for decades, right? Old research. The competitive players, the socialites, the completionists, and the explorers. When you try to take someone from, like, just your regular life and get them into fighting games against their will, against their impulses, these personality types have a huge impact on who picks it up and who, like, drops it in 15 minutes and is looking at their phone the whole time. However, there's also another phenomenon that I've noticed in the same time, since I've made that previous video series. A player's personality type actually changes a bit based on how they perceive the genre over a long period of time. Usually the first fighting game that someone gets pretty serious with, they almost always started out as someone who played that game casually for fun. They did the single-player stuff. They played low-level casuals with their friends. They maybe did some completionist stuff, messed around in training mode, etc. And then eventually they probably started hearing about competitive play. They started watching tournaments. They thought it looked cool, thought it looked fun. Eventually, bite the bullet, they start trying to improve their skills and play other competitive people, at least somewhat seriously. Anime time skip later. Now, they've been playing for months, maybe years, as a relatively competitive player. They might not be that good per se, but, like, they understand the game, they watch the pro scene, they're part of the competitive side of the game. Now, let's say they try to get into a second fighting game. They're like, I want to pick up another one. They experience struggles that they didn't actually have with their first game, because their perception of the genre has fundamentally changed from casual to serious and competitive. They come into an unfamiliar game with the intention of reaching the place that they're already at in their main fighting game, okay? Because that's their day-to-day grind, right? That's what they think of when they think of the genre now. So they try to bum rush into becoming competitive and try to learn a shitload of new information all at once, get overwhelmed, burn out, and face more hardship with the experience without ever developing much of an emotional connection to the game that they're playing. A lot of players try to pick up a second fighting game and then drop it really quickly because of this. For Street Fighter 6, for like an entry-level player or someone with only a passing interest in fighting games that won't automatically be sold on just the idea of competitive play, I overwhelmingly recommend starting with World Tour mode. SF6 has an entire fucking, like, 40-hour RPG campaign mode that's actually really fun. Like, genuinely, don't play the tutorial. Fuck the tutorial, it sucks, okay? World Tour mode has all the same information that the tutorial does, but at a much more digestible pace. While you're playing a usable approximation of the real gameplay, you get to play the game, you get used to the controls, you get used to the inputs, the movement, against non-player characters for longer extended periods of time than just like the couple dozen of seconds that you would get from a single round playing against a real player in normal circumstances. You get to play non-player character enemies that are designed to be fought casually and to get you used to the controls, like fucking Subspace Emissary was for Smash Bros. Brawl. It's good all around, it doesn't drag, it has... The RPG mode, it has weirdly actually good character writing for all the principal characters that you can get bonded to, the ones you like, compared to a lot of other RPGs, and it teaches you practical and important lessons in a way that doesn't overwhelm you and doesn't feel like homework. Looking at the stats for this game, like the Steam stats or whatever, a shockingly small percentage of the player base has even done World Tour mode, which I think is absurd. I think it's because of the name. Like, I've seen plenty of players, beginner players, new players, come in, try arcade mode, because when they go into the menu, it's called story mode in the menu. So they clearly want to do single player content, and they want to do, like, story mode content or whatever. They just don't realize that is literally exactly what World Tour is. It's the main game, main story, main campaign, single player mode. The thing is, if you want to try a fighting game and jump headfirst into actually competing and improving with your skills, you still need to play enough of the raw gameplay to get a feel for the controls, understand all the basic mechanics and how they would realistically function in a match. It's already hard enough just to try to smash cut through tutorials, which is exhausting and feels like homework, and most of the information does not stick in a new player's brain at all. It takes much longer for things to stick. Playing matches will be an uphill battle if you're constantly aghast with situations that you do not understand why they're happening or why they would happen. And where's your sense of attachment, of progression, of completion, of community, or even of competition? Do you get any of the core appeals that a video game would offer from trying this, like, death by fire approach? Look, single-player content's entertainment value, super subjective. Hell, I don't even think the multiplayer aspect of this game it's also subjective, but apparently, you know, lots of people enjoy it, so here I am. My point is, you have to have fun with the game before you turn it into homework that you have to do, and maybe for you, maybe that won't be World Tour mode in this game, but there always has to be a first step, sliding into the water. You have to fix it in your brain and turn it back into a video game. A game that's supposed to be fun, that you play with, that you play around in, instead of jumping into it as something serious that you need to become skilled at. There are only a few players in the world who have, like, the right personality and the right skill set to just take this boot camp-ass approach to learning fighting games, or have the legacy skills to immediately be strong at any game they ever pick up. And a boot camp without a coach to guide you is just like self-inflicted torture. So, rather than spit out a series of disconnected things that you should do and skills that you should learn or facts that you should know about how things work, let me tell you a story of strength. See, a couple of things about fighting games compared to other genres or activities. Fighting games involve a lot of turn-taking, usually, a lot of drastic crowd control mechanics, essentially. If you are doing something, the opponent is probably heavily crowd controlled and extremely limited in what they can do at the same time, and vice versa. It's not like in like a shooting game where you can both see each other, point the guns, and shoot at the same time. You can both act at the same time. Fighting games, one player gets to act at the time in the majority of important circumstances. Because of this, it's not enough that you know how to point and shoot in order to play at even a basic level. You also have to understand the interplay between things that you can do, things that you can't, and when, and why, and this is heavily affected by more complex components, like what character the opponent has, and what that character can do. If you don't know when it's your turn, and when it's their turn, to at least a basic degree, you will struggle to play. Some fighting games are a bit looser. Some games you really need to know specific pieces of information to be able to get the clear chances to play the game. In fighting games, there are 100 ways to win and 1,000 ways to lose. You can lose simply because you get steamrolled by something that's new to you. Some technique, some move, a strategy, etc. that is bizarre and that everything you understand about the game doesn't seem to mean anything to. It doesn't mean that you don't know how to win. It means that you don't know how to not lose against that particular thing that beat you. The way this game's player makeup breaks down, these are the ranks: Rookie, Iron, Bronze, Silver, Gold, Platinum, Diamond, Master, and Legend. Master rank ranges like people who are fine, people who are pretty good at the game, to people who are like the top class killers. Low Master rank and below, the players are almost all incomplete in some way. As in, a player in Platinum is good at some skills, but weak at others. Maybe they have a game plan that nets a high success rate and high damage and good combos, but they have really weak defense, weak reactivity. They get flustered mentally and lose the thread of their strategy. Maybe a player is decent at stopping people rushing in on them, but doesn't know what to do about an opponent that stays far away from them. The ranks don't really paint a picture of how someone plays. A Platinum player might be patient, or they might be crazy, they might be sporadic, they might know a lot of technical information, be very knowledgeable, they might be playing off instinct and know very little. The only constant in a single rank is that the players are all incomplete. Whatever skills or knowledge or experience they do have only takes them so far in the face of the things that they have yet to add to themselves and their gameplay. This incompleteness generates a lot of chaos and inconsistency. Take 3 players, player A, B, and C. Each player is in the same rank, so the game and, they have the same relative success rate, win rate, loss rate, whatever, against people of their peers. And, however, because each of these 3 players has totally different skills and weaknesses, things that they know, things that they're good at, things that they're bad at, things in the way that they play, player A demolishes player B, who can fucking smoke player C, even though player C fucking batters player A. Alright? Complete Pokemon trifecta triangle. Just because they're in the same rank doesn't always mean they are evenly matched if a player's strengths collide directly with another player's weaknesses. At a beginner level, it's the same concept, but 1,000 times more intense. Every beginner starts learning totally different skills and ideas and approaches, and there is very little overlap between what 2 beginning players are even trying to do in a match. Also, matches can be flawed indicators of your current level because competitive sports, some even more so than others, are heavily dependent on you being at your peak performance. This is true for real athletes and esports dipshits like us. This is very true for SF6, which puts a lot of mental strain on you, requires a lot of focus, reacting, anticipating, short-term memory, making quick adjustments without losing a beat on your rhythm, emotional restraint, self-confidence in the face of adversity, sheer focus, everything, okay? On one day, you can play at your best self and be completely on point, and let's say you play at like a Diamond 4 level. And then the next day, you're not in the right headspace, your brain is cluttered, and you're not finding the right zen or the right approach, and you play at a mid-platinum level. It makes a huge difference, and it's yet another factor that makes it difficult to perceive your own growth linearly and accurately. There's also in-game matchups. Characters are also Pokemon, and some of them do better against B, but worse against C. And these matchup strengths and weaknesses are unavoidably connected to your own assortment of skills as a player, too. And lastly, sometimes you just lose. You have to lose. Bad luck. Or even good luck. You happen to win. You didn't make any especially bad decisions or clear mistakes. You made rational choices with good, modest skills without falter, and it just wasn't your day, and the opponent was about as good as you, and you just lost, okay? When two more or less equally matched opponents fight, someone has to win and someone has to lose. That's just the way it is. You only really affect your odds of winning, not the actual win itself. I coach players, and I play like some of my buddies from the coaching for sparring, and like take a mid-platinum player. I will win 40 games against them, but they will still win 2. By any account, I am obviously significantly stronger, but at the same time, I still have a 5% chance of losing, even with a huge gap in current strength. I am explaining this because your growth as a fighting game player is not in a straight line at all. A single match against another player is not indicative of your overall strength. As a player, you don't grow linearly and just consistently beat players who are below your current rank. You are simply becoming a more complete player, while you gradually improve at the pieces of yourself that you've already developed. That completeness doesn't necessarily make you significantly deadlier, but it does make you gradually more consistent against all types of players and all types of strategies you might run into. As such, I like to describe your growth as a player in 2 parts: completing yourself to become more consistent, and developing your best skills even further to become a bigger threat. There are players who can threaten to take out a top-level player in a tournament, but who are not necessarily all that consistent on their own. Sometimes they do well, sometimes they do quite poorly. And there are players who are very consistent at beating players who are below their level, but who also would not really shake up a bracket. Consistency and deadliness are both important aspects of being a competitive player, and you can choose to prioritize one or the other as you please. And again, 100 ways to win, 1,000 ways to lose. Being consistent is hard. It's the grinding work of learning how to deal with every fucking one of those 1,000 ways to lose. Whereas being a killer, being lethal, is refining those 100 ways to win. The easiest way to win more and win easier, especially in an aggressive fighting game like Street Fighter 6, is to simply kill the opponent before they can kill you. And the fastest way to win more as a player at almost every rank in the game is to just become deadlier than you currently are. It is hard work and takes a long time to become more consistent, but it's relatively easy and fast to figure out how to run people over harder with your own agenda in a match. I would say that anything below legend rank, literally the top 500, 1,000 players in the world, I would say anything below that, offense is an easier and more efficient way to get a higher win rate than trying to become more stable as a player. And this game is really fucking hard, okay? Even some of the best players in the world can get run over by the insanely powerful offense that just naturally exists in this game. You can have a 6 out of 10 offense and a 3 out of 10 neutral in defense and still comfortably get into master rank. This is where there's some disagreement, some contradiction between how most people talk about fighting games in the FGC and I guess what my opinion is the truth. FGC heads talk about fighting games like pure Darwinism. If you win, you're the better player, you won, a win is a win, that's reality, suck it up. There is truth and falseness to this, obviously. A single win, even a huge number of wins, are all heavily influenced by inconsistent factors. Whether you're performing at your best or your worst, the player matchup, their assortment of skills, the character matchup, circumstance, bad luck, whatever. You could say that there's no such thing as a clean one player is better than another because performance is not linear, you know? A player can, be good be broadly good in these ways, but not be as good at this particular matchup as another player, etc. But at the same time, a top-level player will still beat a platinum-level player 100% of the time, unless they have an actual aneurysm mid-match. I think any discussion of flat comparisons of being better or worse is an exercise in futility, and probably missing the point of competition. Competition is just when people get together to create the circumstances for self-improvement. You improve yourself, against the infinitely increasing challenge of other players who are also improving themselves. I think if you try to define yourself or any other player, you have to do so based on a nonlinear collage of things that are cool. Am I in the top 12% or in the top 10% of the player base? I don't fucking know. How do you measure that? But I did this sick-ass combo in this match, and it was fucking awesome. I have a really solid win rate against my peers. I've grown a noticeable amount in the past 3 months. I used to struggle with this, now I don't. That kind of thing. So I think you should judge your growth primarily by setting small or large tangible goals so you can see when you've achieved a certain strength that you didn't used to have. Your tangible goals can be reaching a certain rank online, doing one fucking epic thing, improving your win rate in a certain matchup, pulling off a great setup or a combo when you have the chance and getting used to doing it automatically. It will make your training more focused to have small targeted goals, and it's the only realistic way to actually see your growth as a player. I guess this is as good a time as any to explain the ranks in Street Fighter 6. Now, the context of what way that you're playing the game is also important. Playing a first to two in like a ranked setting is different from playing indefinite matches against the same person in a battle room or a hub, which is different from being in a tournament bracket. Some people are good on ranked, but have some mental barriers or whatever that make them perform worse in a tournament setting. Playing online has a different psychological impact on you than playing while sitting right next to a flesh and blood person. Consider these to be like different game modes. Players who are at a certain skill level in one game mode might be stronger or weaker in another, etc. But anyways, just looking at the online ranks, the first many ranks of the game are the learning players. Everything from rookie to like low master rank are all in the learning phase at various stages. Generally speaking, a player who is two ranked sets, like organizations, down from another player stands no real chance, a la bronze to gold. The bronze only has a very rare, far-off chance of winning. Silver to gold has a shot at winning, okay? Master rank, around 1600 MR to 1800 MR, those are pretty solid players. Players who are more or less complete and can only be refined from there. Up to this point, you can improve simply by making no obvious mistakes. But after this point, even if you make no obvious mistakes, you still won't be good enough without unlocking some sort of even deeper potential. This is a misconception that a lot of people have. People will talk about fighting games like all it takes to get better is to make the correct decision, like not make any mistakes. And that's true for any competitive sport, period. Any competitive sport, learning how to not make any mistakes right up until the point where you are good. And then you need to figure out how to become great. 1800 MR to maybe like 1950 or 2000 MR, those are threats. These are players who, on a good day, could take out a top player as an upset in a tournament bracket. These are the kind of ones where they'll beat a player in winner's side and then rematch him again in loser's side and lose to the pro the second time. Next, you've got the killers, the people whose names you know, or people that are of that skill level, people who will consistently make top 24s in big events, and it would be unsurprising to see them in top 8 a lot. And then finally, you have the enlightened, the actual fucking gods, the people that you expect to get top 4s in majors. So my point is, know what you're getting into, you know? If you choose the harder path, if you're like, I want to learn by being really defensive and learning all of the things and learning how to deconstruct every single thing and whatever and just taking this very stable path, you cannot hold any resentment towards the players who are doing the easier path, who just run very strong offense all day and fucking kill you, okay? You have to understand that you are choosing to be more complete and more stable, and you have to accept that you will not win as many games as quickly as players who take the easier path towards quick wins by developing very powerful offense. Either way, you should play in a style that suits you. Beginner players are all incomplete, like I said, but it's not just that they start from scratch and learn things in a different order. players come into fighting games with certain dispositions. You will simply be better at some things and worse at other things inherently, based on your personality, your gaming experience, your circumstances, whatever. Fucking your gamer horoscope, okay? So you should figure out which things that you are better at, or that you feel that you're a bit better at, and also make sure that they're things that you actually enjoy doing. If you have fun doing a certain technique or exhibiting a certain skill, it's a good indication that that is something you will mesh with as you go. A lot of players come into fighting games with some preconceived notions of how things are supposed to be or how things are. Like, oh, I know this about this game, and oh, I know these characters are top tier, right? Or, oh, I can't play modern, that's for babies. And if you're really concerned about being your strongest self, things that you're good at are much more important than things that are supposedly strong in the game. Find a character, an idea, an approach, something that clicks with you, that makes sense to you, that you can apply intuitively. That's your first step to growth, is starting with your best foot forward. I mean, in the Say Jam Slam, I was watching the streams, and Suikono was literally like, he's like, I gotta play Classic, that's like the only way to play the game, I'm not playing Modern. And then in the same stream, he's literally saying, like, you can't have fun with this game until you dump hours and hours and hours into it because it's so difficult to do the execution for special moves. So you need to play for so long in order to get those basics down before you can even start to have fun. And it's like the duality of those statements, and also he's not wrong. Like in the way that you he is perceiving the game and what you can do or should do or is viable, he's absolutely right. Like, he would have to put in tons and tons of time before his perception of the game results in the state of the game that he wants it to be. But I mean, yeah, he articulated, I would get the footage, but I want to get this uploaded, and I would have to wait for find the video stream. But anyways, so he said, he's like, yeah, I know I don't need combos and I don't need to do these special cancels in Classic or whatever to be able to win, and I could just jump heavy kick and just sweep over and over and I could still beat these opponents in my current rank. But he's like, I don't feel good about that, and that doesn't make me feel good about my play or about the playing of the game. And yeah, I mean, he's absolutely right that like your own expectations and your own ideas of like what you should be doing or how your game plan should evolve or how your gameplay should evolve is like one of the biggest hindrances in your own enjoyment of something, because you have an idea of what you want to do and then you're like, either that's really hard to do and takes tons of time and effort to do, or you do other stuff but you're like, I don't even feel good about this. I don't even feel... So like when people even try to pick up Modern, they're like, I don't feel good about this. Just because they've convinced themselves not to feel good about it. So it's hard to like get over those kind of assumptions and expectations and just like your entire way of being and looking at things. But yeah. Anyways, on to some more tactile guidance. Yeah, first get comfy with the basic controlling of the game. The best way to do that is World Tour mode. Get comfy with moving around, attacking, blocking, performing the actions, doing the basic stuff. Honestly, if you even do like a couple of hours of World Tour mode, you'll probably be a small amount of practice and basic knowledge away from getting silver rank instantly. If you simply attack in a way that seems to work quickly and effectively whenever you can, then you just hang out and block very, very patiently whenever the opponent swings at you, or right after they hit you with anything at all, then you should have a basis to work through bronze rank, maybe half of silver, at least. Even much, 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 much further into your fighting game career, I'm talking all the way up to master rank and above, you can solve many of whatever your current problems are by simply doing less and being more patient before you make a decision or press a button. You figure out a way to kill easily, and then you subtract the parts that are not working well enough. Now, there are a lot of different skills to develop in fighting games, and in each individual fighting game, there are also a lot of different skills or techniques that require your mental energy, your focus, in order to perform them. This game especially, it's not about doing everything flawlessly. You do not have to represent every skill that you have learned and that you are capable of representing. and it is unrealistic to focus on every single skill that you have all at the same time. You need to be efficient with what you choose to put your focus into. So put it into doing things that you know that you can do and that will give you the biggest advantage possible for the mental energy you're putting in. A lot of talent of the high-level players you cannot see. It's completely unseeable because you can't see how good they are at shifting and rotating their mental focus while they're playing. Their focus loci, if you will. They have an incredible ability to just shift their priorities and their immediate skill set within a fraction of a second. But that's beside the point. What I really want to say is when you learn a skill, it doesn't mean that you can do it all the time, and it doesn't mean that you should expect yourself to do it all the time. Most of the time, you simply gained an ability to do so long as it is something you are currently putting focus into. But in the middle of a match, you have to choose what of your focused-based skills that you need, and which ones that you can afford to ignore. If you try to focus on 4 different things, and you fail at all of them at even half the time, it is much worse for you than focusing on 1 or 2 of the most significant things, and getting them 90% of the time. It is not just actions in the game. You also improve yourself by uncluttering your mind and removing the parts of yourself that you don't need. The parts of your thought process you don't need. Fucking self-lobotomizing, okay? A lot of players at almost all skill levels will get beaten up because something happens to them, maybe multiple times in a single match, and the player will instinctively think, the brain instinctively thinks, I gotta find a way to beat this thing. It keeps happening to me. I keep losing this. I gotta find a way to beat this thing. No. No, you don't. No, you actually don't. You really, truly don't. What ends up happening is they will get distracted trying to find a solution to a relatively not important, not threatening problem, and they will lose the focus that they need on their core fundamental skills that they need to solve the much more important problems. This happens, for example, beginner level players with fireball characters. Just one obvious example. Beginner level 2, like, all into intermediate to like fucking 1300 MR players will still have this problem. They will get caught up in trying to solve the problem of the fireballs that they lose focus on things that they can solve and are more important to solve, okay? So, like, you can put a ton of focus in trying to react to every single fireball and like make sure you're approaching and not walking into them, but like you're approaching as close as you possibly can, and you're trying to perfect parry, and you're putting all this focus into doing these difficult things that often do not yield you anything. Okay, difficult things that offer you barely any reward most of the time, and in the meantime, your mental focus is completely off of the anti-air, and the fireball character just suddenly jumps at you, blah. You're getting decimated in the footsies. You're trying to find any button interaction, or any, like, precise, sharp whiff punish that will let you compete. Stop it. Literally fucking ignore it. Do less. Do less is almost always the solution. Do less, do nothing. Put your mental energy into anti-airing and stop trying to do hard shit with your limited brain cells, you fucking ape. The point is, self-confidence is important. Fighting games have a lot of contradictory ideologies at play, a lot of duality, if you will. Things that are bad become good if you're right. Playing logically is good, but also logic can be predictable, and being predictable is bad. Adapting to your opponent and figuring out solutions to problems is good, but also being stubborn and not letting a few bad circumstances shake you from what is already a fundamentally solid game plan, that's also important. Not adapting is important. The point is, the solution to your problem might not be what you think it is. When you lose, it's easy to think that you lost because of a certain thing that happened repeatedly, or that you remember, or you couldn't solve one certain thing. But actually, you lost probably because you were bothering to try to solve it in the first place when you didn't need to. You should have played a normal game plan and ignored anything that is just a small annoyance, a small disadvantage. Being able to recognize what's a small annoyance and what you can mostly ignore, and what's a real problem you must solve, is a key skill that you have to develop as you get better. You're not trying to do everything perfectly, forever, all the time. You are trying to do enough things right that it gives you a nice, big advantage that will make it most likely that you will win. The literal best and most talented players in the world cannot play at their best all the time and do every single core skill and solve every single problem and always win. So who the fuck do you think you are, right? Do not try to do everything, counter everything, solve everything. Do what you're able to that gives you the best shot at victory. You're not reinventing the wheel here, and if you find yourself trying to create a solution to something from scratch, especially, you need to recognize that you're doing that and put the brakes on that shit immediately. Leave that kind of shit to training mode. Fighting games are different from team-based games, of course. For a lot of players, they're on the journey alone. They've got no training partner, no locals that they go to, no one to really confide in. In matches, there's a greater sense of control and also a greater sense of frustration and failure, or feeling the control slip away from you, in knowing that the only way for you to win is if you and you alone do something better. Fighting games are emotional. They're often egotistical and lonely. You only have a perception of your own history, your own journey, and your own effort that took you to this point. And you can only have baseless assumptions and stereotypes when you're faced with another player, an opponent, or just anyone you're looking at. And it is unhealthy to see other players through assumptions and stereotypes, especially when you can only judge yourself by comparing yourself to other players. Are you a stereotype? Should you be compared to a stereotype? Don't let the image you have in your head of another player stand in your imagination. If you have to imagine, put yourself in their shoes. The way they play, the strategy that they take, the skills that they represent. Imagine, if you were them, come up with a reason for why you would choose to do these things. And look at your own play through the lens of an outsider and see what stereotypes you would think of yourself that come into play, the embarrassment and the negative assumptions. Respect your opponent for what they have accomplished and the impressive feats that they've managed, and the completely unknowable journey that has taken them to this point. The unknowable plethora of skills that they've developed that you'll never even get to see, that you can't even comprehend, and for their own unique way of finding a path that results in their success. See their imperfections in the context of your own. Is the game perfect? Probably not. No video game ever made is actually perfect, whatever that's supposed to mean, but it is what it is, and we're here to have fun and work on ourselves. Okay, for controls, I need to do this in this video, but it's not part of anything else, I'll just get to this. For this game specifically, there's two input methods, classic and modern. Even amongst the top-level players and mainstream commentators, there's a lot of misconceptions about modern and how it works. In Japan, as far as I'm aware, and what I've been told, they don't give a shit. Modern is just a convenience, and they use it accordingly, and lots of new players use modern. But over here, we have, like, dumb assholes that make up ideas about how it's a crutch or it's not really playing the full game. Modern characters are kind of their own characters in a way, because each modern character is different and has their own moveset adjusted to the modern control scheme in a different way. Modern characters lose access to a small selection of moves compared to the default classic. And some characters lose some important stuff, other characters lose shit they probably weren't going to use anyway, so who cares? In exchange, you get access to a very fast method of performing certain moves. Some people don't understand that you still usually get most or all of the same special moves, and you input them the same way that you would do in Classic, with full complex motions. You simply have access to faster and simpler inputs for slightly weaker versions of those moves if you think the situation calls for it. In my opinion, this is a no-brainer for people who to at least learn the game with. It doesn't take away a single thing from your ability to learn and develop all of the important skills in the game. There's no evidence that it isn't competitively viable, even at the highest levels of play. For a newer player, you just get to control your own character a lot easier and not be tripping over your own feet as much trying to do some of the inputs correctly that you're not as used to yet. If you think you'd have more fun training and getting fast and consistent with the full motion inputs, go ahead, you can, but Modern lets you at least cover a few more bases of your initial incompleteness you will have as a player, so you can start learning more situational and decision-making type stuff. And lastly, for this first video in this series, take care of yourself. When you're learning a lot of information, or when you're heavily focusing and doing mental work, the brain consumes an alarming amount of your body's glucose and vitamins. Make sure you're eating properly, you drink a lot of water, and you have a heavy intake of sugars. and you're in a comfortable, cool environment. The brain is the biggest eater in the body, and tensing your muscles to perform fast and effective execution inputs will also increase your body temperature. Professional shogi players in Japan play a mentally exhaustive board game for hours and hours, just sitting there in front of the board, almost a full day at a time, and it's for a single big important match. They play in primarily cool environments with open air and air conditioning, and they require periodic intakes of high sugar content foods, snacks, and beverages, in addition to an actual lunch break at noon, in order to continue to perform without fatigue. The learning period of a fighting game is especially taxing on your brain. Learning and digesting information is extremely energy intensive for your brain and your body, and trying to perform actions that you are not skilled at yet involves a lot of heavy effort. When you're clumsy at doing an input, your body doesn't have the experience to know how to perform the technique. You'll be tensing and exerting a lot more of your body's muscles than are actually necessary to do that action, because your body is trying to figure out what's actually necessary and how to do it. As you get better at most skills, you'll be able to perform them smoothly and without exerting as much effort. But when you're a beginner, everything from the learning to the doing will eat away at your body's nutrients. Your emotional state also affects your body temperature, and obviously it affects your mental processes. So, yeah, stuff your fucking face with pastries, you freaks. Pastries, small candies, etc. are good. Get yourself a fan if it's hot. Drink plenty of water. I have a sleeping disorder, so I have to take a heavy amount of caffeine for the first several hours of the day. And after that, water would be the healthy choice. Not that I always have the discipline to do healthy things, but I should. And if you're in a learning phase, you definitely should. Anything else that you want to do is your own prerogative. Everyone learns differently. Do you want to take notes? Do you want to take periodic breaks to mentally process what you've just learned? Do you want to meditate? If you've never been good at eating boatloads of information, maybe consider trying out a different type of mental exercise or meditation that you haven't tried before. See if it helps you. Don't push through the exhaustion of it, okay? Make the process work for you. That's my core advice that is applicable to players of all backgrounds and most or all skill levels. We'll handle some of the basic bitch beginner level shit in the next part. See ya.